Right, so welcome to Blender 2.80. Few disclaimers to get out of the way first. Primarily, I haven't done a video in over 2 years, so I'm most certainly going to be rusty, so apologies in advance for that. Secondly, I'm not proclaiming myself to be a Blender expert. I've just been dabbling on and off for the last couple of months when I get a bit of spare time, tipping away, just to see what the story was with it. And yeah, 2.80, enjoying the experience so far. Easy enough learning curve. The last disclaimer is this is it's still beta, so this is the latest one. I think they said it was locked off after this. You can see the version down here, 2.8 0.71. So this pretty much should be locked off now, the UI. So if you're installing it, because it's nightly build, so um, if you're installing it, it's probably going to look like this, but your UI won't look like this. I've customized this a little bit. You'll have a timeline down here, animation timeline. Your outliner here probably be over here, and this and that will be a bit different. So we get on with that couple of caveats out of the way. We get on with the broad overview here. So this Blender button here, it's just pretty much that's the splash screen that'll be there when when you load it up every time. Just basically information about the development fund, the Blender Devs Foundation, and release notes and things like that. File, that's just your usual suspects. This one, Control N, and general is sort of your default. Then these other ones are quite interesting because they're actually their own, almost like standalone environments. They're heavily customized and saved Blender Workspaces, which I'll talk about in a second. But yeah, this is very interesting. This one, 2D animation, it's pretty much based around a grease pencil, and that'll open up a new session and leave this session and ask me to save. So that's why I'm not going into it. But you can check these out. It's the grease pencil anime, so you've probably seen videos online. It's very powerful, and you can also use grease pencil to create 3D meshes as well. Sculpting, that's like a dedicated sculpting environment almost. Even though all these tools are in Blender, as I say, they're just workspaces that have been created. The sculpting one, but it's all ready to go. You just bang, open it up, and there's a subdivided sphere with mat cap applied, and you can just start sculpting, almost like Sculptress. VFX and video editing, it's like its own compositor and then a video editor. But you have these up here as well, and these workspaces that are available. Modeling is the default one when you load Blender. So render, just sort of some render settings. Window, there's workspaces again where you can create them. Save screenshot, toggle full screen. And then you can also tear off a window here, so it's going to tear off. It's basically a clone of Blender, so it's going to double your resource usage, I suppose, because it's just a clone of the application running in this window rather than just a viewport torn off. But if you have a second monitor, you can always stick it over there. I'm on a crappy laptop at the moment, so I can't do that. Right, so I'm going to close that down because it's starting to slow down a bit, because the laptop, as I said, is a bit shit. I'm recording here as well, that old chestnut. Right, so the workspaces here, as I said, this is default. This is modeling, sculpting. You can see here I'm ready to go with this brush, just like ZBrush's standard brush, and everything's pretty much ready to go. UV editing is the same. It's not going to look like this. It's just got this metallic map is in here. That's why. That's that weird horrible thing, but yeah, there's the UVs anyway for that element. Texture paint, same thing, texture paint and environment. So these are all, it's like Modo, or Maya has a bit of a similar sort of a setup, but Modo's probably the closest with workspaces like this that you can go through. That's the shading one there, so again, that's that metallic map, so that's why it looks jarring like that. So this would be your shading. You have your node editor, like your material editor or slate editor max, and then that's Eevee there with these look dev, diffuse and chrome shader balls here, and all this stuff can be customized. Animation, pretty much ready to go there as well with animation. Same for the other ones, rendering, compositing, and then your scripting as well. So handy workspaces. These two icons are just Go B, so it's just like Go Z, but I've enabled the add-on so your UI won't have these on it. Scene, this is another interesting thing in Blender. It's like you can have a scene within your project, multiple scenes within your project, basically like a game engine where you'd have a project an overarching project, and then within that project you'll have game levels. So that's what scene is. You can create new ones and blah blah blah. And Blender's funny because you could have two blenders open at the same time, and you can actually just copy and paste Control V and Control C and V between blenders, which is very useful as well. View layer, this is like render passes. You can link up this to collections. Collections are the same in Max as your layer editor, hierarchical layers. And you can create folders, subfolders, and all the rest of it. Down here, then, this is pretty much similar to Max's tabs in the command panel. You have create, modify, hierarchy, all pivot, and all the rest of it. So the first one here is just that's pretty much your scene overall. So you know what renderer you're using, your color management, and all the rest of it. Light paths is where it's like Arnold, where you have your sample bounces, and I won't go into all these. You can have a look through these yourself. But basically, just there's your scene. There's this like Max's command, common panel in the render settings. You have your resolution, start and end frames for animation, and your output. View layer, denoising is there, render passes, and this will be connected up here to the view layer. As I said, render passes like Arnold's AOVs. Scene, we have your scene units. So Blender units it's metric by default. And you can switch it over to Imperial if you're still living in the dark ages, or America. So one Blender unit is equal to 1 meter. These grid squares here are 1 meter. It can be changed obviously with the unit scale, but that's the default. And that's pretty much everything in there. And then you have your other world sort of settings here, or scene settings. Here's your world. So that's where you set up your HDRI background like Max's. When you press A for environment settings, it's where you can put your scene HDR, and that'll be linked up then to the over here. So this is world. I could change that back to object, and then it's whatever selected object I have here, that's the material. Change that over to world, and then that's the same. That's panorama.hdr. So where was I? I'll switch back to modeling. Yeah, so that's that. There's your SSAO. This is your object data. So I'm going to press N in this panel here. You can do this anywhere in any of these panels that are like viewport panels, and it'll give you this context sensitive. Everything in Blender's context sensitive. Basically, you have these three. These ones here are added on. They're add-ons. These tabs. So item is I'm just going to go to edit mode, and these are various different items, and it's giving you location and world space, rotation scale, and then its dimensions. Tool is pretty much, I'll press T over here, and these are different tools that I'll get into later, but basically it's changing over here. So whatever tool I've selected, then it just gives you little tool tips here. And then view is the viewport, like so your camera, your clip, your focal length, 3D cursor thing there. That's your 3D cursor, which we'll get into later on, the infamous Blender 3D cursor. And in 2.80, the developers have wisely added a feature to turn it on and off, because it is a bit strange coming from other 3D programs when you first kind of see it. So anyway, that's just the location is a 3D cursor and its rotation and world space. So that's pretty much that. And I just wanted to keep this short, so I'll go over these and then we'll leave it at that. So as I said, you can change all your different panels to whichever one you want here. Object mode and edit mode. So that's like edit mode is like sub-object mode in Max. So if I switch into that, here's verts, edges, faces, and you can also tab in and out of that. So tab is just the hotkey, and then when you're in edit mode, by default 1, 2 and 3 switches between verts, edges and faces. All this stuff, as I said, is context sensitive, going to change between edit mode and object mode, and everything's going to change between those modes. So you can see this top bar changes, and then even within these drop downs here, overlays and shading, they'll change as well. So view, T and N are these two panels on the side, T on the left, N on the right. And you can see that when I go into the customization video, I'll go over this, but you know, hotkeys are displayed for that are already set by default within the key map. Select. So these are just all the usual sort of tools, you know, same with your create drop down in Max. You can also shift A is the hotkey for that. Add object, and then that's just that object space, and then into edit mode, which you can press tab, and then you have these vertex edge face, and you can also right click depending on, you know, which you're in, and you'll get context sensitive tools as well. This is your similar to your orientation, transform orientation, so global, local, all the usuals. And that hotkey is comma. This here then is that was, sorry, comma for that pie menu, with the same sort of stuff. Where was I? This is your pivot point, very important. This works different to Max, so once I got my head around it, it's actually great for modeling, but they kind of work in conjunction. Your origin, your pivot point, and your 3D cursor sort of work together. So the hotkey for that is full stop, or sorry, period, depending on what you want to call it. So that's for pivot point. I'll get into all this more in depth in future videos. So snap, and then your snap mode, same as Max. And also it's great in Blender, you can just hold control and snap gets automatically activated once control is held down. Proportional editing is excellent in Blender. It's like soft selection from Max, but way better because it dynamically updates the fall off in the viewport as you're doing it, just with the mouse wheel, so you don't have to set it and check it and set it and check it and undo it. It's very good. These are just filters, visibility filters, same in Max in the hierarchy panel, the way you can turn different elements of the scene on and off. This is filters for gizmos, which I'll get into later on as well. Overlays, this just basically turns everything off except for the geo. All these settings here are your viewport settings, which, as I said, change context sensitive, so I'll go over a few of them. I just don't want the video to go on too long. They're mostly self-explanatory, and there's your 3D cursor there, you can see it in the middle of the screen. But some of the ones, this one here, you can turn these on or off and they'll be visualized on your mesh in different colors. Creases are just like open subdiv in Max, so they'll have their own color on your edge, so if you can see in the viewport if what edges have those creases. Same with sharps, that's like soft and hard edges. Bevels are marked for the bevel modifier, which is the same as the chamfer modifier in Max. Seams then are your UV seams, and then you have other things like turn on edge length, angle, face area, and everything for more sort of precise modeling. It's quite handy for modular kits or whatever you're doing. It dynamically updates the measurement in the viewport. Then you have just your normal directions, visuals, and that's pretty much it. Face orientation just gives you an idea of what way your normals are facing. Blue for all facing out, red for facing in. Yeah, so just have a look at that yourself. This is the grid scale and subdivisions, just like Max. It's not directly connected to your scene units, which I showed. Where was it here? Scene units. That's more or less it, apart from the pretty much the viewport renders. That's wireframe, and then the three main mode of viewport renders are solid mode, which is the workbench. Sorry, not solid mode. The workbench render. This is Eevee. The middle one is Eevee, and then lastly, you have cycles there, which is the ray tracer. I'm not going to tab into that because it'll probably have to compile all these materials and everything, and I don't want it to freeze up again. So the great thing about these is Eevee and cycles, like you can set up all your materials, and it's pretty much a one-to-one, and it's very easy to set up this. You don't have to jump through all different hoops and messing around with different settings and everything. It's just easy to set up. We'll show that in the video down the road. But yeah, this is pretty much it, and that's the basics of the UI. And I think I'll leave it at that because it's going on a bit long. So I hope that was useful, and we'll dig into a bit more meat and potatoes there in the next videos coming up. Yeah, sure. I'll just have a quick talk about this. These are like studio light caps. And if I go to settings here, it'll open up preferences, and you can install your own custom studio lights, matte caps, and look devs, HDR. So those IBLs will be for Eevee. Then you have your matte caps. These are all installed by default. Same with these light studio lights. Sorry, I want to just show where you can change these as well. These studio lights, similar to the way in ZBrush, the way you can those 4 and 3 layer materials. Yeah, so this is just you can single color random. So every item, every different mesh will have random texture. If this texture is applied, then this is handy as well. You can change this within the viewport without having to go to your preferences, X-ray and shadow, X-ray mode, and I usually set that down to 0. I'll show that in a future video modeling. This cavity, it's like an effect, a ridge and a valley. It's like an AO and a curvature kind of effect in your mesh, which can be nice while you're modeling. Outline just kind of boldens the outline around meshes, so you can sort of you'd see it just sort of objects beside it will stand out a bit more. Hard to describe, but you'd have to play around with yourself. And then specular lighting, just specular lighting in the viewport there, to do with the workbench renderer. So remember, this is Eevee, and this is your workbench. So I find myself using the workbench to model in most of the time. Right, so that's it, and I'll leave it at that, and hope it wasn't too boring. Alright then, cheers, thanks, good luck.